Liverpool has played this huge role in all of your cinema. I believe it's featured in virtually everything, although I think the last 2 feature films were set elsewhere. What is the special bond with that city and you?
Well, I think it's because we all are bonded to where we were born. And I loved my street and my family and my little environment, which was very tiny. It literally was my family, the street, school, the movies, and God. That was it. And I love the richness of what was our life. We had nothing, and most people didn't have anything, but it was a rich life, because things which were small became huge, like being able to go and buy the makeup for my sisters on a Friday night. I can still smell Friday. And so it's all of that, but that's bound up with where you are and being taken into town pictures, which it was a huge thing. It was a huge treat. But noticing the buildings we have in the centre of Liverpool, one of the greatest examples of neoclassical architecture in the world. It's called the St. George's Hall. It's huge and was built in 1857. And I used to go round it with my mother. And on the portico it had Artibus Legibus Concilis. And I always read it. I had no idea what it meant, but it just seemed very strange and exotic. But I loved going into town because, like old cities, it had little nooks and crannies, all the things that make a city interesting. And once you get rid of those, you know, it's no longer interesting. It just isn't.
How much is left of the Liverpool you grew up with?
Virtually nothing.
Virtually nothing?
It's gone. I mean, I went back to where I was born, and it looked so tatty and uninteresting. And for me, it was the whole world. I thought it was wonderful. But it looks tatty, because it is.
The other theme that really runs through your first 2 major feature films is the idea of the glory of going to the cinema palaces. It's a theme you revisit of time in the city. This is the greatest joy. These are the palaces you're allowed to enter, as opposed to Liz and Phil, I believe, in their house in London.
Betty and Phil.
Betty and Phil, my apologies.
Yes, but I mean, there were 6 cinemas within walking distance of me, another 6 in town. I mean, you cannot imagine the glories there were. And I went all the time. I mean, my sister took me to the cinema just after my father died. And it was to see Singing in the Rain at 7. I mean, what a fabulous introduction. And of course I went all the time, musicals and what were called women's pictures those days, things like All That Heaven Allows and Magnificent Obsession. I was taken to see them, and Love Is a Many Splendid Thing. I mean, I remember being taken to that. That was fabulous. And I still love watching it. It's not a very good film, although it is well crafted. But it's one of those odd things that cinema does. There's a scene in it when William Holden and Jennifer Jones are on the beach, and then they get into the water to swim to the other side of the bay, and that's when you hear the tune for the first time, the theme, and I just cry from that moment on. And I don't know what it is, but I just can't. I cry from that moment on.
Even today?
Even today, when she runs up the hill at the end, and instead of William Holden, it's a butterfly. It's still my beating heart.
Isn't that the way it always works?
Yes, absolutely. That's the way it should have been.
Many of us feel as though the effects and pedals and new technologies that cinema has used to better itself perhaps has cheapened a bit, much like as you've described Liverpool to us.
Yes, because at the end of the day, whatever the technology is, we're only telling a story and how that affects you. It's very simple. There's nothing more complicated than that. But you have to be honest and true. And I do believe this very passionately, that an audience knows when it's not true. They may not be able to tell you or articulate that, but they know when it's not true. And even if it was full-blown sentimentality, like All That Heaven Allows, it's done with panache and craft, and it is true to itself. And it becomes moving. And if you are moved rather than made to cry, which is a big difference, you never forget. Even if in an entire movie there's only one scene that breaks your heart, you never forget it, ever.